Bitcoin City, powered by volcanic geothermal energy, tax-free, smart city, was one of many things that many had hoped for when in September 2021, El Salvador was the first nation to adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender. However, now, 4 years later, under the urging of the IMF, has amended the Bitcoin law to now no longer recognize Bitcoin as legal tender. Why has this occurred? A nation that many had hoped, including Bukele, would increase financial inclusion and increase efficiency of remittances, however, has led to underwhelming results, as well as leading to numerous consequences, such as exacerbating corruption and aiding organized crime in the region. Cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin come with the risk of increasing corruption in El Salvador. Cryptocurrencies have the ability to do this because since there's no middleman in a transaction between two individuals, there is a level of anonymity that is offered by Bitcoin that traditional forms of transactions such as banks do not provide. This is what makes Bitcoin very appealing. However, Bitcoin isn't totally anonymous as the blockchain has the ability to be viewed by the public that can be utilized by law enforcement to trace transactions and track down individuals. Countries such as El Salvador, with weak regulations to regulate crypto and law enforcement with little experience and resources to monitor transactions, make it easier for corrupt individuals to use crypto undetected. This is worsened by the fact that there are numerous tactics that can be employed to increase privacy and decrease detection, such as mixing the Bitcoin. This is where mixers work to combine numerous sources of Bitcoin by combining them into wallets, then giving out Bitcoin to the final destination, make it harder to track where the Bitcoin's final destination would be. There are other tactics as well that can be used, such as downloading web applications such as Bitcoin Fog or Dark Wallet that have the ability to obscure the origins and the next destination for Bitcoin. However, the biggest obstacle to controlling corruption is the state itself. Corruption has been a severe issue in the country for decades, across the political spectrum in the country. There has been numerous examples of corruption in the country. For example, during the pandemic, the Vice Minister of Security, Osiris Luna, had sold 42,000 government food packages that were supposed to have been given to individuals in need during the pandemic, as well as thousands of dollars of contracts being given to phantom advisors that hadn't existed in the first place. This is not an isolated case, as the Minister of Health, Francisco Alabi, and Minister of Agriculture, Pablo Andaker, had allegedly allocated millions of dollars in contracts to associates that are close to them. None of these individuals have been prosecuted for any possible crimes and still retain their positions. In fact, the ruling party-controlled legislative assembly has signed into law the dubbed Alabi Law, named after one of the individuals allegedly involved in corruption. Protects individuals that had been a part of the purchases and contracts during the pandemic from administrative, civil, and criminal liability. The Nuevas Ideas Party, as well, has weakened the ability for the state to prosecute corruption outside of during the pandemic. And the Legislative Assembly took the action of placing Rodolfo Delgado as the nation's Attorney General. One of his first decisions he had took was dismantling the Anti-Corruption Commission, the International Commission Against Impunity in El Salvador. Delgado has also closed files and raided offices of prosecutors investigating corruption. The adoption of Bitcoin in the country has likely improved the ability of politicians to avoid being detected for corruption and has helped to fuel the high levels of corruption in the country. Gangs in Central America, including MS-13, have increasingly used cryptocurrencies. In Mexico, the DEA has found that criminal organizations have begun to use Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, to move millions of dollars of profits from the drug trade to launder the money. The criminal organizations move billions of dollars in illicit profits to cryptocurrencies to avoid detection and asset seizures. In Latin America, regulations are often weak and still in the phase of development. In El Salvador, is no different. Many times at exchanges, it is not required to show registration or proof of identification for tracking purposes. Numerous types of cryptocurrencies are traded for altcoins to obscure the source of the original account used by the syndicate. In the region, Bitcoin has been increasingly employed as a form of payment for cases of extortion, as well as being used as a form of payment in the transportation of drugs. In spite of the fact cash has been traditionally used by these groups, it is both safer and more convenient to store crypto inside of wallets instead of physically hoarding money in safe houses. The negative consequences to Bitcoin in the country has led to the cryptocurrency becoming unpopular within El Salvador, leading to many individuals not to adopt the cryptocurrency. First major reason for making Bitcoin legal tender was to increase financial inclusion. Implementing Bitcoin as a legal tender and have it successfully adopted as a legal tender was going to be an arduous task. Multiple hurdles, starting with the infrastructure. One of the most glaring examples of the lack of infrastructure is the fact that internet penetration rates are currently at 71.7%, with only 4.58 million of 6 million people being internet users, far lower than most developed countries. As Bitcoin is digital, large segments of the population, especially in rural areas and poorer areas, would not have the ability to access Bitcoin for them to use. The Salvadoran economy as well has encouraged companies to bring Bitcoin mining to the country. However, the nation as well is facing water shortages that have been worsening under climate change. This is detrimental as large amounts of water is needed to cool computers, especially as Bitcoin is being mined. As El Salvador is a tropical country, the amount of water needed to cool computers is more than compared to more temperate locations such as the US. The amount of electricity Bitcoin mining takes up is about 6,400,000 kilowatts hours of electricity for a single Bitcoin to be mined, which equivalent to about 6,400 Salvadoran homes uses. Although the Salvadoran government has made efforts to increase energy production by increasing production of geothermal and solar energy to meet demand, and has been successful in this, the nation is not alone in struggling with the side effects of Bitcoin, as other countries in Latin America, such as Paraguay, has been as well aiming to become a center for Bitcoin and has attracted Bitcoin mining due to low cost of energy, thanks to its reliance on hydroelectric power that is powered from the abundance of large rivers that flow through the country. Paraguay has now faced an energy crisis as the amount of energy needed to sustain Bitcoin mining threatens to exceed production in the country. Looking back at El Salvador, the country has done a subpar job as well in educating the average citizen on financial literacy over Bitcoin, a critical task to do, as many individuals in the country don't have a good grasp how Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies work. Many are hesitant to adopt the currency. For those that do adopt cryptocurrency, it is important for them to know how to use it properly and responsibly. For these reasons, many individuals that weren't already hooked up to the banking system have not chosen to connect to it through Bitcoin. The second reason indicated by the government as to why it wanted to make Bitcoin legal tender to increase the efficiency of remittances. However, by August of 2024, only 1.1% of all remittances sent to the country had utilized cryptocurrencies. The main reason was because of the high cost and the slow speed involved in transferring Bitcoin from primarily the United States to El Salvador. The wallet promoted in the country, being the Shiba Eel wallet, had not helped, as the wallet, although having a signing bonus, had been fraught with issues including with glitches and data breaches that had led to private information of tens of thousands being leaked. Remittances make up a key part of the economy, taking 24% in El Salvador. The Bukele administration struggling to change the transaction habits had contributed to Bitcoin not being as widely adopted as it could have been. As reasons mentioned previously, the government struggling to convince individuals to adopt crypto. In fact, according to a poll by the Universidad Centroamericana, 90% of individuals in the country had not used crypto in 2024. Only 7.5% of the population had used it, and a meager 1.3% of the population believed that crypto was going to be a main direction for the country. Crypto has other issues to it, such as high price volatility that have driven many away from it. For example, in December of 2024, prices had peaked at $106,490 USD. It had then declined by $30,000 to $75,004. Then there was a period of growth, again cresting at $111,681. There was again a decrease to $105,097, and the time of recording is not unheard of to see price differences between the highest and lowest cost for a day to be over $2,500. This is problematic as in a middle-income country such as El Salvador, the average citizen cannot deal with a sudden decrease in the value of their savings due to a fluctuation in prices. The central bank buying millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin was a gamble. When the central bank had bought the Bitcoin, there was always a chance that the Bitcoin price the next day could have either increased in price or a decrease. A decrease in prices would have decreased the value of the nation's assets, something that El Salvador cannot afford as a nation is struggling financially. This need to resolve the nation's economic woes have led to the nail in the coffin of the government's aspirations for Bitcoin to be one of El Salvador's legal tender. Due to desire to foster economic growth and to manage the high public debt, El Salvador sought out the IMF to help the nation solve its crisis. In December of 2024, the IMF had achieved an agreement for a $1.4 billion loan with the country. Numerous concessions by the part of the El Salvadoran government were done as part of the agreement. This included scaling back numerous of the more controversial policies that surrounded Bitcoin, such as the acceptance of Bitcoin in the private sector for transactions becoming optional, along with the reduction in the amount of economic activities and transactions being done utilizing Bitcoin being reduced, as well as the repeal of Bitcoin as a legal tender. The phase of the experiment with Bitcoin as a legal tender is over. Widespread adoption and the readoption of Bitcoin as legal tender seems unlikely at the current moment. The country is still accumulating Bitcoin despite urges from the IMF and still have ownership over $500 million worth of Bitcoin. The experiment that Bukele is conducting is far from over, and only the future knows if this experiment will have an overall positive effect on the country or will be viewed as a failure. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.